Hello, curious folk. It is me, Leah, and I'm joining you tonight for yet another wonderful webinar. I can see people joining in real quick, so I'm going to give you guys a couple of seconds to find your way around this webinar. Please look around. There is a chat option where you can ask us questions, send me your recommendations for anything that comes across is interesting or worthy noting, etc. We've got a Q&A section for Zoom. So if you want to ask us anonymously, you can do this there. I would highly recommend that people join as much as possible in this webinar. We're anticipating 1 hour webinar, but allowed more time just in case if we have too many questions and we run overboard, as it happens usually. So aim is 1 hour, but please do enjoy and take part. When I'm reading out the questions, I must say, I'm not going to read out your names. It's going to be as confidential as possible. So I'm just going to say, hey, someone is saying this and that, or whatever, and then me and Rory will address the questions. So please feel free to use the chat and the Q&A section. My name is Leah, if you don't know, and I'm a psychologist and a sex and relationships educator. My brand, my company is Sexperts, and I've invited Rory, who helps people with their polyamorous relationships, to join me for a webinar in which we can discuss open relationships, and more precisely, if we can feel romantically involved and loving towards multiple people, if jealousy and fear can come in the way and destroy things, and also how to better manage key aspects of our open relationships. So I'm so glad we have, wow, so many people joining already. So please, Roy, introduce yourself to our crowd here on Zoom and on Facebook. I'm just going to say one more thing. If you're on Facebook, I'm not going to be looking at the comments. There's the deal. You need to join on Zoom. Please, Roy, introduce yourself.
Hi there, good evening, and thank you so much for inviting me. This is really exciting. I'm used to doing events and talks about polyamory and ethical non-monogamy like live in person. It's the first time I'm doing it on Zoom. So it's a bit weird to not see people's reactions and not like engage, with eye contact when I'm talking about communication, but we'll have to basically make it work. I am going on the assuming that, I'm going to assume that people are largely joining without a lot of prior knowledge and experience about ethical non-monogamy, open relationships and polyamory. But I'm happy to be proven wrong, and I'm happy to get any kind of questions or comments and feedback, and I hope that we can turn it into, as much as possible, into an open discussion, because everybody's experiences is vastly different, and I don't want to claim that I have, the solution to everybody's problems, but I think that there are a lot of general themes when it comes to handling multiple relationships at the same time, handling emotions that come up, and that's what I hope to talk about today. A little bit about myself. So I'm 50, and I have lived around the world in China and in America and in Israel, but London has been my home for about half my life. And I spent my 20s and 30s in long-term monogamous relationships. I didn't really know that it was possible to live any way else. I've never heard the term polyamory. I heard about, say, swinging and people who have open relationships, but it never felt like something that I could do, that I would do, that my partners would even be interested in, and therefore I also never brought it up with my partners. But I always felt like something was kind of missing in my life, that somehow I wasn't fully fulfilled, and I would often get bored in relationships relatively quickly with the routine of it. So the way that I discovered this is basically after the breakup of my kind of last long-term monogamous relationship. I went back to dating. I went back to online dating and met somebody on OkCupid. And on the first date, we had a very kind of high match online. And on the first date, she told me straight out that she doesn't believe in monogamy. She's been married before. She doesn't want to do that anymore. She wants to be in an open, free connection with people. And immediately I just thought, wow, that's really interesting. I really like this person, so I want to keep seeing her again. And obviously that is her boundary around relationships. So I will try it, and really never look back. And over the years, I've tried to be in a kind of primary open relationship. I've tried to be solo poly. I've been in a primary live-in kind of hierarchical poly. And currently I can describe it as more of a relationship anarchy, or no rules, just consent, respect, and clear communication with my partners. So I know that you mentioned some of the questions that came up initially when we were discussing putting this together, and the overarching question of like, is this really possible? I think that for me, I always knew that it was possible. I just thought it wasn't allowed, that it just wasn't the done thing in our society to openly love more than one person. I mean, I've constantly, when I was in relationships, felt connected, felt attraction to other people. I just didn't act on it. When I was single, there were many opportunities for me to, date and meet people where I wanted to pursue more than one relationship at a time, but I had to choose. And I think what we're talking about here is you don't have to choose. You can see where your heart takes you with every person based on only the connection and the energy that you develop with them, without taking into account what you should be doing, what society is telling you to do, what books are telling you to do, what other people tell you, and that is for me kind of the ultimate freedom to really live our lives fully. But I also, again, it's a theory. Not enough studies have been done on this topic, but I do feel like it's a spectrum, and some people are just monogamous by nature, and some people are very polyamorous by nature, and others fall on the scale somewhere between. Similarly, with kind of sexuality, you have a spectrum, and you can be fully heterosexual or fully gay or bisexual or anywhere along the spectrum, and I kind of feel that it's the same.
I think it's important what you're saying, that your own journey has been taking you through different ways of practicing polyamory. I don't say that often, but I'm also poly, and I'm poly since I was very young. I was probably 12 and I was writing stories about throuples, and that word was not in my lingo back then. So I've known, and I've basically been living an authentic poly life most of my life. I think that I crunched 3 years of my relationships history into let's try monogamy, but realistically it didn't work. And I think it's really important to say that, as you said, there are different ways of practicing poly. There isn't one single way, and that's something that a lot of people are not that aware of and don't know what the possibilities are. So on the other end, as you were saying, it is like sexuality, it's on a spectrum, and we can do our best to explore. Mm-hmm. How do you think that people should start if they want to explore?
There isn't really one answer. What's really interesting is when people try to go according to, say, books that they read about how to open up. Let's say you're a couple, you're in a relationship, you want to open up your relationship. Obviously, this experience will be very different from somebody who is single and says, well, I'm just gonna authentically be open and won't say that I want monogamy, therefore I will meet partners who already see things in a similar way. But I think that there are some people whose personalities is very much like just jump into the deep end and start swimming, right? And figure it out. And others are very methodical and want to read books and maybe go to counseling or coaching and work through their issues around that and take things very, very slowly, kind of dip their toe in and get used to the temperature kind of thing. So it really depends on your personality, how you normally try new things. For me personally, I'm very much somebody who dives in and figures things out, figures shit out. So that can get some messy sometimes. Sometimes you do it and you commit to it and you're like, oh my God, it's overwhelming. I don't know what I'm doing right, what I'm doing wrong, right? But it's also a very fast way to learn.
I'm the opposite, Roy. I am a researcher at heart. So I would start with researching. I knew everything there was about sexuality and sex before I even had like a serious boyfriend I was going to do stuff with. So I personally advocate for learn before you do, because otherwise you may end up, as you said, in some very messy situations.
You do. So, I mean, I can't claim that everything has been rosy and I've always, had happy kind of poly life. Definitely not. But I can say that most of my really powerful lessons came from heartache, from trouble, from failure, from getting things wrong.
Yeah.
And that is something that stays with you, and it's a lesson that doesn't really leave you. But we're both, I think, examples of how you can approach this very differently. There are lots of books that talk about polyamory, about ethical non-monogamy, and I'm happy to recommend a few people who are researchers and want to start by exploring this first theoretically. There are great podcasts, and I still listen to podcasts about this because I feel even when you think you know everything, you don't. There's always something more to find out. It's almost really interesting to hear from other people's stories and experiences. So yeah, that's definitely something that is worth doing. There are great, really fantastic resources, say on Facebook with closed Facebook groups for discussions on polyamory, on open relationships, specific groups for thruples or triads, specific ones for people who are, it can get very granular depending on what you're looking for, but some of these groups are very active. People really post kind of heartfelt questions and needs that they have and like looking for advice. And the advice I read there from experienced people is great, and actually it's always, I think, helpful when you're new to this, when you post something, to see how many people already experience exactly what you're going through and can really talk from their experience. And it's like really comforting to know you're not in this alone.
I agree, but I will also not so much play the devil's advocate, but be outspoken about the fact that I also participate, and not so much participate, but I look through what's going on in a lot of these groups, and I see too many people sharing bad advice as well, or very stigmatizing advice, opinions that can be very hurtful and damaging and not actually helpful for the person that's going through this.
No, I don't disagree. I agree. And I think I automatically filter out those things when I read it, but I think that if you're new and you're asking for advice, it can get quite confusing. Exactly. And actually for some people, when they're getting things wrong and they get kind of told off, about it and berated about it, they might push them away and might make them feel like they're just doing it wrong and therefore they shouldn't try. So there are definitely downsides.
It is. I've seen a lot of questions or shares on these groups where someone genuinely shares how they feel about their current open relationship with someone and then ask for advice or for support. And the next thing they get is saying, oh, you shouldn't be doing this, whereas they weren't actually doing anything wrong or anything that was damaging or whatever it is. So I'm very wary about recommending resources where professionals are not actually giving their know-how and like having invested years in studying and understanding and practicing. I'm not saying that professionals are without a fault. No freaking way, I'm not saying this, but I've seen too much negativity and too much BS advice on such groups, and that's why I don't even try to participate in them, because if I try to correct someone, like I've been jumped on, online, and I'm like, what's the point? If someone wants advice, they should get it from reliable sources, and if you don't have the money to spend on professionals like myself, Roy, and many others who specialize in sexuality, relationships, etc., then the next best thing is probably get books and podcasts and whatnot.
I would say that, yeah, even when you're talking about books, things are not always that clear cut. You know, and sometimes people write a book and it becomes very popular, but then you find out something about the author that basically changes the whole, your whole view. That happened with somebody, one of a pair that wrote more than two, Franklin Ball, and then it turned out that he was emotionally abusive to all of his partners. And it puts into question some of the things that were in the book, not the whole book, and I think that it's still a valuable book, but common sense and listening to your own heart is really important. And as I mentioned, never try to make yourself do things that may not be right for you and your personality. Yeah. And if you don't, and when, obviously it becomes more difficult when it's a couple trying to say open up, and where the two people in that relationships operate at different speeds and have different ways of wanting to explore this. Yeah. And that's where, open, honest communication and nonviolent communication is super important, because oftentimes that first, if there's like a first try and it's very negative, you can it can just ruin the whole thing, and you'd never want to even go back to it, because it just hurt so much. And what brings to mind is in a lot of cases, more in, I guess, the mainstream or traditional relationships, or the whole issue of, say, cheating or betrayal, in a relationship. Ultimately, if somebody cheats, say for somebody else, yes, there's a betrayal there. It's definitely bad. It also highlights something that's wrong in the relationship. There's an unmet need there, because either they couldn't get what they couldn't get something from the relationship and they were looking for it somewhere else. Either they are. There are many reasons for that, but ultimately, the fact that they couldn't just sit down and talk about their needs, and the fact that they're thinking of doing this or they're attracted to somebody else, means they're not free to talk to each other the way that two people who are intimate, who share a life, really should be talking.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the things that I keep saying is, I know that us professionals oftentimes say communicate, but it's not that easy. You need to invest the time to learn how to communicate, to learn where your feelings are. Maybe you oftentimes say too much always, or you never. And that pushes the other person away, and it's creating a bigger gap. So when Rory's talking about communication, I want to say learn to communicate. Don't just try to communicate. There's so many good strategies and so many good books on the topic, and professionals can help you identify your patterns of behavior, of communication, where you fail, etc. So communication is the key. And I also want to just insert here, I see that people are putting their hands up. Please, if you have questions, put them in either the chat box or anonymously via the Q&A section, and I'm going to read them and we're going to discuss them. So please take as much part as you want. You have this amazing opportunity to ask us experts live questions now. So take it. And to stir us into jealousy and fear. Talk to me about jealousy and fear, Roy.
Well, so I would say that I don't experience jealousy in a way that's like debilitating, that freezes me. I don't think I ever have, even when I was in monogamy. Actually, the thought of like somebody flirting with my partner was something that made me kind of happy, and a bit turned on. So, and knowing that somebody's like has attention on my partner never really bothered me. What I didn't like was cheating, lying, but like not the actual act. So that was an easy transition for me, but I talked to a lot of people that come to me or, that ask me for advice on that. Friends that share their troubles, and I've experienced that also in partners that I had. again, there's a lot of resources online, and I think that it's something that is covered a lot in books. The whole idea of jealousy is, to my mind, about, again, something that you as a person need to work on, to understand where those feelings of jealousy come from. It's often tied to insecurities, to a need to control somebody else's behavior, fear of being alone, fear of losing out to somebody else, or fear of not being as good as somebody else. And all of those things that can be worked with help, often with therapy, to basically get to the point where you are happy with yourself and you understand what are the reasons why your partner wants to be with you. And those are reasons that won't change regardless of who else they're with. Yeah. So yes, jealousy instills fear, but if you are able to express it in a constructive way, not as like, I am jealous, therefore you can't do what you want to do because that would make me feel bad, right? That's never going to actually resolve the issue that you have. I do feel jealousy. I just have learned, I guess, told myself to process it in a healthy way, in a way that highlights, kind of shines a torch, like a floodlight on what are my issues. And for example, there was one time where, just as an actual example from life, where I was out with a partner at a party, and she got a message from somebody that she really liked, that she had been on dates with, but never had sex with, and he was leaving to go away, like leaving the country, the next day or very soon, and he invited her over that night, and we were like, that was our date night for a party, and she asked me if it's okay if she, went and saw him and spend the night with him, or like she wasn't sure if she was going to, but she said she will let me know if she does, and I was initially kind of angry. I was like, oh, what do you mean? Like, we had a plan. We're here together at the party. Like, but then I thought, well, okay, I know it's an opportunity for her that she won't have again. I'm here with my friends. I'm not alone. So, okay. And then later on that night, she messaged me that she's going to stay the night and they're going to have sex. So I came home alone and, feeling very lonely in my bed because I didn't expect to be alone in bed that night. I expected us to come back and have sex and, kind of be together. So I felt jealousy that I was not involved, that she was with somebody else and not with me. It was more of a, kind of FOMO or like envy, I would guess. I wasn't really jealous of him because I knew she would come back to me, but yeah, I was envious. And also upset that plans didn't go according to the way I thought they were going to go. But, so I was lying alone in bed, feeling sorry for myself and just focusing on, and that's okay. And just like saying to myself, okay, it's okay. You can feel sorry for yourself. It's like not the end of the world. She'll be back in the morning. She'll probably have some fun stories to tell. And yeah, and it will go away, this feeling. And I reminded myself that I also have times where I go out on my own and she stays home. And maybe she feels like that too. And again, that's okay. We'll move past that. And that's what happens.
Yeah. I would say that in regards to jealousy, what invokes jealousy oftentimes, as you said, is fear that maybe you're not enough, fear that someone will take your goodies away and all of that. And I often speak about knowing your love languages and how you relate to people, what makes you feel loved. Because by the sound of it, it seems like one of your love languages is quality time. You wanted that quality time with your partner and you felt cheated out of it, by the sound of it. I'm not saying that's how it is, but that's how it sounds. And I have felt jealous of people only when their time with me is being taken away by someone, not because they're having sex with someone else or whatever. If time is taken away from me with that person, then I'm like, not happy. It can be structured, it can be productive, but people need to understand and know what makes them jealous, what their triggers are, how they react, because oftentimes their reactions are not that visible. They can be very passive aggressive, they can be just bubbling under the surface, and then the other person is like, what the fuck is going on, so it is super important that people recognize these patterns that would come up. for them in relationships in regards to jealousy and fear. Because again, if you're not addressing them, as Roy said, you are very likely to struggle in a relationship and be in a bad place with yourself as well. And
sorry, just to add here and reinforce it. Really talking about your insecurities with your partners, basically being open about what's wrong. Don't keep it to yourself, even if you feel that it may be petty or not important enough, or maybe you don't want to stir things up. But I think that, again, what I often encourage people to do is practice radical honesty. Practice it even in things that are not so important or like really big, first of all. But that practice will allow you to also hear things that you don't want to hear, and remember that the person who's telling you these things loves you, wants to be with you, is not out to get you. What they're saying is not an attack. It's a reflection of their emotions, their feelings, which are valid. Maybe, again, it doesn't mean you've done anything wrong, but listen to what they have to say and don't judge that, but like try to kind of, just show empathy, and do not like get into this kind of defensive mode. And then they will also never be afraid, in the future to tell you things that bother them, or to kind of be more open with you, which is super important, that, you're not afraid of your partner's reaction when you want to tell them something that is a fear or is a jealous emotion or something that they may not want to hear.
Yep, very important stuff. And we are having some people messages on the Q&A. So I have someone say, I'd love some recommendations on podcasts. Thanks so much. What podcasts would you recommend, Roy? You need to unmute yourself.
For podcasts, well, one really trusted one is Savage Lovecast from Dan Savage. His kind of Magnum edition is like you pay $35 a year or something, but it's long, it's good. It's like an agony aunt. He answers questions, but he's very sex positive and poly positive, and it's not just for kind of non-monogamy. It's for sexuality and relationship, just generally. I really respect his advice, and there's a kind of motifs that recur a lot. But that's one I definitely recommend. There's one called Poly Weekly. They're not weekly anymore now, and I think because of the pandemic, they've gone quiet a little bit. But there's like hundreds and hundreds of episodes, and they focus specifically on poly issues. And their polyweekly.com, I think, is a website. They will have show notes where you can look at the episodes and see the topics that are interesting to you. So that is one. There's another one called multiamory, and well, that's what I can think of right now.
Okay, that's okay. We've got more people commenting and saying things. So these are, especially for Polyamory Weekly, it's a really good podcast. I do recommend it. Dan Savage, greatly appreciate his work. Although I do not find that he's that poly positive. Maybe other people will disagree with me, but
well, he himself is in an open relationship with his husband.
Commish, that's how they describe themselves. Well, Excusez-moi, I need a tea. And the next one says, any advice for a traditionally monogamous female with a polyamorous man who has another female lover who is more open?
Advice. So I guess the question is what she feels is coming up for her. What is she actually struggling with? A polyamorous man who also has another kind of poly partner would ideally understand what he's working with, and the kind of constraints of being with somebody who is or has been monogamous, and take things easy with her, take things more slowly, and basically talk a lot to understand what her issues are. But ultimately, there's no rule that said that if you're dating somebody poly, you have to be poly yourself. And also these things change, are dynamic, and you can be in a relationship now, but you know, in a year's time, you may find yourself in 2 relationships. And again, I can't, without understanding more about her struggles, it's hard to give generic advice, except try to kind of reflect back what you struggle with, or maybe the issues are around, because she mentions the other lover who is more open, is that she feels maybe she's not as equipped, you know, to be in that environment as this other person. But it's not a competition, and obviously there's a reason why this person is with her, this man is with her, and that's what. And I think every relationship needs to stand on its own. It shouldn't be a comparison between the 2 relationships.
I would also insert here that not everybody is suited, in my opinion, to poly relationships or to be with someone who is poly. I think that, as Roy was saying earlier, everybody's on a spectrum. So there are some people that are more like monogamous than open, and others that are just really open to having multiple partners. And I have had clients who have tried to push their partners into polyamorous relationships without any consideration of the other person's spectrum, etc. And it's not worked out great for them in the long run. So
yeah,
again, start with respect.
Sure.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you know, like how much you kind of go into polyamory is also a question of like how much you are able to share your heart and, like, you know, kind of show intimacy and be in intimacy with multiple people. Some people are happy with intimacy with one person, but maybe sexually they can be with more people. You know, they can, you know, basically have sex for fun, for more casual, and that's like more of an open relationship dynamic. Or some people are in a, you know, in a couple and they're only play with other people when they're together, never separately. So there's a, you know, it's whatever works for you, whatever you're happy with. But it's important that you check that your partner is also happy with what you want. And you're right that, yeah, it's not for everybody. So you shouldn't push people into something they're not really comfortable with. But I know that some people, you know, are, you know, may not be comfortable with something now, but they want together. Like they want to kind of get out of their comfort zone and explore more. It just takes them time, and it's something that they need to be able to. They want to feel heard in order to get there. They want to feel respected, that their needs are being listened to.
Yeah.
And I want to just mention that, you know, if I am going on a date with somebody, and if I'm interested in someone, you know, if she doesn't know fully that she's poly or like really serious about doing it, you know, and if she has reservations, I would rather not develop relationships with her, because I don't want her to be hurt later down the line, you know, because it's easier to handle it if you're just in a casual aspect of casual phase of the relationship. But once, you know, emotions are involved, it will be harder if she's not really like really serious about being poly.
I operate the same principle. I go out on a couple of dates, and by the 3rd date, I'm out with everything. I don't want to waste anybody's time, and obviously, I don't want to out myself on a first date. It's, you know, I've done it, and the response has been very much like, "Oh, do you want to have sex now?" And I'm like, "What? Like, where did you even get that?" You know, but misconceptions and ideas about polyamory are, you know, crazy out there for people that do not know anything about it.
Yeah, we can spend an hour. We can spend an hour talking about misconceptions.
Oh yeah, I know. I've done a webinar on Q&A about polyamory and misconceptions about fidelity and things like that. But you can talk about misconceptions of polyamory itself for an hour straight. So I personally have found that if someone is not interested in even learning about it, then I'm not gonna try convert them and, you know, preach or whatever. I'm just like, okay, that's not gonna work out. We want different things. That's fine. Thanks for meeting me and thanks for your time, and move on, because there are 7 billion people on planet Earth. People, you're not gonna end up alone by being honest and authentic about yourself. And to move to, well, we're getting more and more Q&As. in the section. So someone says, thank you both. My burning question is this. I feel that I want to have an intimate, nurturing relationship with at least one person. I feel constrained by the idea of just one partner. It's not very natural to me. But worry about having more than one partner becoming a how do you read that? Diluting experience where nobody's committed. What about days when I'm not fun? I'm not feeling well or attractive and I want someone there for me. I'm interested in a model of a relationship where there is one or even two core people, not just free flow. Or is there something else I should know? I'm single and exploring. What advice do you have?
Well, very long, but it's a good question. And by the way, just to make you aware that my girlfriend is sitting next to me, so she's like listening in, and once in a while, like giving some very good feedback that I can hear. And yeah, it's so first off is the notion of like if you're in multiple relationships, you're not committed. I call bullshit on that. Like I feel very committed to my relationships, and it doesn't matter if it's 1, 2, or 3 or whatever. I mean, I have a limitation on my time. And if I'm in a committed relationship, I would want to be with this person at least every week, see them on a regular basis, feel like I'm spending quality time with them. But it's still a commitment. It's still, we make plans together, for the long term. And if they happen to be sick on our date night and don't want to go out and feel miserable, I will, stay with them and do the boyfriend thing and make them soup. Like there's nothing that's gonna, change that from somebody who's in a monogamous relationship. But however, I mean, I do think that what's changed in my mind, since when I was monogamous, is that I don't have to be with people all the time. I don't have to be with my partners all the time. I actually enjoy now also having alone time. And if I'm not feeling very sociable, I don't have to be with anybody necessarily. So even if I live with somebody, then like I am now in lockdown, we can spend time in other rooms. We don't have to be together all the time. So I think learning more about what I can do for myself when I'm feeling less than is super important. So, but yeah, every connection that I have is really unique. So I don't feel like it's being diluted by the fact that I'm also loving somebody else, or even if so for example, when I'm with a partner, it's not that I forget about my other connections. They're not top of mind right now because I am with a partner and I'm focused on her. But if it's like, I don't know, for whatever reason, if it's like her birthday and then she can't be with me because she's with another partner, I would still call her to wish her happy birthday, even I am with somebody else, for example. Just communicate that that's what's going to happen. So yeah, there are. She's asking about models of relationships where there's core people. So often people call somebody who is like the main person in your life like a primary. Many people don't like these terms because primary implies that you have a secondary relationships that are somehow less important. Now, if you're in a relationship with somebody that you live with, that you have, say, kids with, by default, they're going to be hierarchical, in a hierarchy, and they're going to be like more important than other relationships that don't have those kind of commitments with them. But it doesn't mean that emotionally you need to necessarily prioritize the emotions. But there might be that, obviously there's certain overriding needs for that relationship that might come first. And I think that's important to communicate to any new connection that comes up as well, right? Yeah. One of the things to really be careful to kind of, I guess, avoid is, if you do have a core relationship, is to communicate very clearly what that might imply to another person coming in, and to not treat them as like just a guest or somebody who needs to just accept whatever rules or whatever kind of agreements that you've already established with your primary relationship, but make them part of the conversation and part of negotiation around agreements with everybody concerned. And we can talk about like the relationship between your metamors, for example. So basically, the partner of my partner, the term is metamor. So again, in order for poly to work really smoothly, it's good to have some communication also with the partners of my partner. It's not necessary. It depends on obviously what's the nature of the relationship. But the closer that they are, the more important thing that it becomes to also have some kind of communication with them. And because I definitely appreciate that partners that my girlfriends like find attractive and want to be with probably are people that are worth knowing potentially if they want to. But I'm not going to like infringe on their time with them. But if there's an opportunity to also kind of hang out together, then I would welcome that.
Yeah. I think that can bring insecurities in some people to hang out with their partners, other partners. But again, I think unless you try, you wouldn't know. And it's worth exploring what's out there in terms of your relationships with these extra people in your relationship. And one of the things that you said is really important is there is no like single way of doing poly, and you can have committed relationships with multiple people. It doesn't have to be like a revolving door of boyfriends and girlfriends and all of that. You can structure it the way you want it, the way it works for you, and be considerate. And yes, there are days when we're feeling horrible, ill, ugly, fat, whatever you can think of. But yes, we will need these people to show up for us, and we need to be able to communicate this to them and say, look, I feel horrible and I need you to be there for me. And most of the time people will, if they don't show up for you, maybe bin them, maybe they're not a good partner for you or whatever. You need to educate them of how you want them to show up for you.
Yeah.
Unless they're expressing interest, then,
Yeah, so, and I've canceled dates before because my partner was sick. I had to come back on my way to a date because she felt bad or whatever. Like it's part of life, and I don't see any different from having to go back from a meeting because your child is sick, or it's you make commitments and you stick to them like a proper human being. Like.
Yeah, I agree. Moving on to the next one. Someone says how to navigate the insecurities we have even before opening up, like to bring up the topic of non-monogamy with a partner that seems very monogamous and doesn't like to have emotional conversations.
Well, I guess this is not a platform to recommend mind-altering substances, but if somebody doesn't like to have emotional conversations, there's another topic that needs to be covered first before you even bring up this. But it's possible that just the way they communicate is different, and maybe I don't know, maybe they need sports metaphors or something. I don't know the particular case, but that sounds like an opportunity to go together to couple counseling, for example, and bring it out in a held space where they maybe feel safer to talk about these issues. But bringing it up for the first time is quite a scary experience, and oftentimes people might maybe recommend a book that they can read together and discuss, or bring it up as something that they know a friend of theirs is struggling with, and like, what do you think about this? Just to kind of gauge their feelings about it. I know that, for example, in my monogamous relationships, if I had brought it up, there was, when I was married, and at some point after a lot of other issues and problems that we had in the relationship, this idea of being open and sleeping with other people came up. And, I brought it up, but I with a lot of fear, but she was not opposed to it. And she was like, well, yeah, we can try it. Like, it's okay. So a lot of it was just my own fear of how I might look to her, Yeah. So, and it's an opportunity, actually, even if you're not planning to do it right now, it's, just talk about it as a theoretical thing is an opportunity to really get to know your partner a lot better.
Yeah. And I would say here that literally a couple of weeks ago, I did a webinar on how to establish safe space and how to communicate difficult topics and difficult ideas and things like that. And I'm repeating myself again and again, but I would say there is a skill to it. So even navigating your own insecurities, asking for that safe space, how do you ask for that space? How do you create that space and reciprocate for your partners and friends and family. It's a skill. So one of the things is, again, repeating myself, but educate yourself around the skills that you need. It's easy for us to say, do this, do the what. This is what you do, but the how to is way more important. It's how to approach, how to create a space, and so on. So keep learning, keep expanding from my point of view.
And also when people often talk about do the work in very kind of generic terms, and doing the work, like the emotional labor, is hard and it's scary and it can be painful. And it can bring up for us stuff that we have buried away, sometimes even from childhood, from our parents, from first relationships, things that are scary. But I think that to get to the point where you can have these honest, radically honest conversations with your partners and with people, there are no shortcuts. It's something that you need to do, and just kind of, there are ways of doing it that might make it kind of easier to process, doing it with support, but ultimately there's no magic bullet, there's no like pill you can take it that make you like happily polyamorous.
Yeah, agreed. Someone has said in the chat, thank you for replying to my question. That alone has been helpful. Someone else on the chat says, I'm seeing a woman who also has a relationship with a man. After our intense times together, suddenly there is huge distance. I'm actually open to having a more open relationship. However, I cannot deal with the sudden distance, and I'm actually looking for a primary partner. Any advice?
So they had a lot of time together, and all of a sudden they have to kind of share their time with somebody else that their partner is seeing, basically.
It sounds like there's a sudden gap between what they have and then
what they expected and what they had before, and they expected to stay that way, and what's happening now. That's gonna be a shock. I feel at a smaller scale when I'm with my partner on holiday for 2 weeks, and all of a sudden we go back and I don't see her for another 2 weeks. It's hard, right? Now that we're living together, when she after lockdown, when she moves back to her place, it's going to be really weird and hard. In this instance, I think that it would have been important from the beginning for them to set some expectations around, I am open to meet other people, and when we do meet other people, we will have to kind of spend less time together. Like that could happen. And I know that even if you logically anticipate that might happen, when it actually is happening and you feel you have this gap, then it's hard. I guess the advice, because they're asking for advice, they're looking for a primary partner. They're looking for somebody who would make them a priority, who would basically spend that quality time and with them. But even a primary partner that you live with, even in monogamy, would have interests, hobbies. They might play golf on the weekend. They might go to tennis, or they might be workaholics that travel a lot. And even if they're monogamous, you may not see them as much as you want to. So that's an important part of communicating about your needs from a relationship to find the right fit. And beyond that is figure out what are your needs. Can you meet some of them by yourself or with other friends? Not all needs have to be met by a primary partner. The whole beauty about this polyamory is that you can figure out what needs you have. You can have them met by different people, and more importantly, is become more a person that fulfills their own needs.
Yeah, definitely, I agree. I have nothing to add. Manage your expectations. Basically, you can't expect that the person will always be there and would have that super connection to you. If it's a matter of the fact that they just need time out from you, you need to communicate about this and how it makes you feel and what you need to feel reassured and all of that. But again, it is a journey for you guys to sit down and discuss it and find what suits best. Again, seek help, professional help, if you want to get good stuff, insights, etc. Someone else says, you mentioned different variations of poly relationships, such as hierarchical, triads, etc. Can you explain the difference?
Okay, that's an easy one. Yeah, so ethical non-monogamy is like the umbrella term. Basically, you're non-monogamous, but you're doing it in an ethical, honest way. You're not hurting anybody intentionally by doing that. There still can be, mistakes that we make. People can still cheat even when they're ethically non-monogamous by basically not keeping to an agreement or breaking a boundary that somebody set. So there's still cheating and everything. You still have to basically think very carefully and practice that ethical side of it. But within that umbrella, you have people who are, as we mentioned before, kind of monogamish. They're largely monogamous. Once in a while, one of them might go on a business trip and have sex with somebody else. They may agree that there's a don't ask, don't tell, DADT kind of policy where they do it, but they don't talk about it. So it's like, whatever I can't think about, I just won't, it won't be in my head, it'll be fine. I think my parents had that kind of agreement, apparently. And that worked for them until it didn't, right? Because they divorced. But I think that for a long time it did work. And then with open relationships, the idea is that you have a primary partner, you're emotionally committed to them, but physically you can be with other people. It's just that you're not expecting to develop emotions for those other people, that other sexual partners. Some people try to enforce that rule of no emotion by saying you're not allowed to fall in love. You can only basically have one-time dates with people. So you can only see them once. Therefore, that way you can ensure that you won't emotionally fall for them. I have to be honest that it's not something that I like or want to support. If it works for people, fine. I feel that there's a lot of scope there, a lot of risk of heartache, because you can't really control your emotions. Some people fall hard even after one time. Some people, if they're restricted and there are these rules in place, they may find ways to go around those rules. And that's where like hiding things and lying and things come up, rather than being totally honest. And if we're being totally honest with a partner, we have to basically honestly say that feeling emotions for somebody you're kind of physically bonded with is part of the human experience. Spending intimate time with somebody, you may develop feelings for them, and that's okay. It's not an attack on our relationship. It's not against it. It's just, it's extra. It's an added bonus. I really see it as the more feelings you can have for people, the more happy you feel, the more fulfilled you feel. It's the more love you have in your heart. It's as simple as that. I know it sounds cheesy, but I want to love lots of people. I know I can't physically for time reasons and energy reasons, but I wish I could. But I'm also realistic with that.
That's great. There are so many questions, you guys. Someone messaged on the group chat saying, hey, we've messaged in the Q&A section. Please pay attention. We are. You guys are just sending us so many questions there. So this is a big topic though, so I don't think we can cover it, but not today at least, I can make a new webinar about it, but someone is saying, what are all the different reasons for jealousy? Is there any resource to learn about that so I can identify my own reasons for jealousy?
Yeah, it's a huge topic. I mentioned before, I listed a few reasons, and I think I can kind of go back and just list as a general term, but I mean, yes, it's a huge topic. But jealousy, I don't think jealousy is an emotion. Jealousy is, again, a catch-all terms that is it's the external display of various emotions we feel inside. And those feelings can be like an insecurity, right? This kind of fear of losing something, losing someone, feeling I'm not good enough, being envious of something somebody else has. Kind of wanting it all to myself, needing to control the other person because maybe I don't trust myself, and I kind of have to kind of externalize that and project it on the other person. I know that some people feel like, yeah, I can do it, but I just could never handle my partner being with somebody else, although I know that I can do it, And again, that's so I think that some of the main books on polyamory and kind of being open cover that really well. The Ethical Slut covers issues of jealousy really well, and it's a book I highly recommend to everybody. That's like the open Bible, really.
It is the best book.
Mm-hmm.
But I thank you for that question. I think I do need to make a webinar specifically on that topic, because jealousy, it's really big. There's so many reasons and also so many ways of handling it. But again, it's a huge topic. Someone else says, do you have any tips when it comes to date scheduling with other partners and your primary partner?
I just want to go back to the previous question quickly. My girlfriend just added something else, which is, if you're not handling their insecurity, if they come to you with insecurities and you don't really know how to process it and how to talk to them about it, and not showing enough empathy, it's possible that that will create jealousy. If they feel you're not really containing their fears, if they're already coming to you with, an open heart and sharing what's going on, and you're not really, and they don't feel heard and don't feel listened to, then that can exaggerate, I think, emotions of jealousy too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And then tips on scheduling. So, well, what you find if you're really investing in multiple relationships is that you talk nonstop and you communicate nonstop, and it just never ends. And it's hard work. So if you are good with technology and you're happy to do everything online, you can basically create a Google Calendar that can be shared with whoever needs to see it, and just add in with different color codes, specific date nights and things like that. If you have a primary partner, you share it only with that, with them, but you can add in so they can see it in their schedule as well, that you have a date with person A, person B, or just a date with somebody else. But there are ways of managing it depending on how you communicate and what's easy to do. Sometimes it might be easier to not have it something that you discuss all the time, because obviously you don't necessarily want your quality time to be talking about other people, dates with your partner. But you can set aside an evening a week where you put out your schedules and you talk a little bit about what you've been doing, what you're planning to do, who you're seeing, kind of sharing that, but kind of putting it in a container as well. So that's another option.
And I will also say here, because I have been in open relationships with people who didn't want to know much, so don't ask, don't tell kind of policy. I had to be, very clear that I'm not going to share everything with them about how I spend my time, because I knew that they are struggling with jealousy and they weren't willing to address it. So let's say that they would ask and say, oh, can we meet this Saturday? And I would be like, no, I can't. And they were like, why? What are you doing? I'm not telling you. And I'll do this even if I'm just meeting a friend, or if I'm just planning a stay at home, read my book type of night, just because I knew that if I'm being open with my calendar, I would have meltdowns all the time from them. And again, they wouldn't be addressing it. So you need to be careful how much information you're giving to each other, because some people may want to know that you're on a date but may not want to know who with, etc. So be mindful and be information filtering. This is my own concept around relationships, information filtering. Be careful what you receive as information and what you give as information, because there is too much information both ends.
You share as much information as the other person is also comfortable to receive, and to hear. And I was with partners where they didn't want to know who I was seeing. They just wanted to know I'm not available. I think ultimately, as far as I'm concerned, what I need to know is that my partner is not available to me. What she's doing with her time, otherwise, it's none of my business. I don't own her time. I can't tell her what to do with it. So she can be rowing or watching a movie with friends or having sex. Like, she's not available to me. That's the main thing that I need to know.
Exactly.
But I do enjoy. I mean, obviously, if she's having a good time with somebody and she is happy with it, it's like nice to hear about her experience. So it'll be good to know in that respect.
Someone says, I feel very protective towards my girlfriend. I feel a bit scared if she meets a new partner. Since I'm scared she will not be
treated, I
like
guess.
that. Yeah, like that beautiful slut flower that she is.
Well, maybe have more faith in your girlfriend that she's an adult woman that can take care of herself. If she needs your help, she will ask for it. I mean, maybe you're in a kind of dom sub relationship and she needs she needs something more, but she can verbalize. You can basically say what she needs. But ultimately, I don't get involved in my partner's relationships. If I see a pattern, if I think that a person is like abusive, if I heard something about him or her, if somebody else told me something about this person that I feel is pertinent to share, I will do it. But I will still not like tell my partner they go on this date or don't go on this date. It's they have agency as an adult to make that decision for themselves. But if something happens and they need my help, I will be there to help them, as I am also with my friends. But I would really be cautioned against like being too involved in your partner's other relationships. If there's a genuine reason why you're concerned, it's something that you can bring up with your partner. But also letting them know that it's not that you don't trust them to take care of themselves. It's like that they, if that's their decision, you need to kind of respect that.
Yeah. Next one. Someone says, for me, intimacy is the key thing. I feel sexually can be with other people, but the intimacy with my partner is that special bond, among other things. That's about definitions to what is sexual and what is intimate. I think that's a big question. It's an important question to discuss with your partners, because your idea of intimacy and sexuality may be very different to theirs. That's my 2 cents on that comment, because there
Totally.
is a question.
Personally, I don't like to have sex without intimacy. And it doesn't mean that there has to be love and strong emotions, but I still want to feel intimate with a person in order to be sexual with them. But I guess the definition of what intimacy means to you is very different. But like I said before, as long as you and your partner, that's what you both want, the same thing, and you're sure that you've communicated that these are mutually kind of compatible needs, then great, and do that. Be very clear with anybody else that you're seeing that's the boundaries within your relationship, right? So if you meet somebody that is looking for a relationship with intimacy, it wouldn't be a good idea to have sex with them and then say, no, actually, this is like, I'm not going to open up to you because I have these boundaries with my partner. Let them know before so they can make an informed choice of whether to sleep with you, to have sex with you, without expecting that level of intimacy.
Exactly. Someone else says, what were the reasons you moved from more rules-based relationship to the anarchy model? Further on that, any tips on dealing with changing relationship dynamics?
Lots.
Big.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'm quite, I have a lot to say on this. And the thing about rules is, and I did agree in the previous relationship to have rules. And the rules were rules basically that my partner decided that she needs to give me in order to make our relationship work. And I had to kind of stay within those rules to be able to also date other people, etc. But rules are an attempt to control your partner's behavior, which goes against this idea that I have of agency, that I mentioned before, of giving agency to your partner to decide what to do with their body and with their time. If they decide that they don't want to be with me, that's okay. If they decide to give time to me, great. I can't force them to do it. So I just generally don't like to use rules in the context of an open relationship. So that's the reason I'd say I would move away from them. They don't work because I agree to a rule when I'm in my heart not happy with it, and I'm doing it to make my partner happy. Ultimately, it's not sustainable. And when I mentioned like a relationship anarchy, it's also quite a fluid term. The idea is that with the relationship anarchy, you tailor every relationship you have with an individual person to both of your needs when you come together. So it may not look at the same with every partner you have. And that's fine. That's why it's going to call anarchy. But there's still commitment and respect and love and all that. That doesn't change. Relationship dynamics do change, and I've gone through a change recently with that, and that's it's difficult to kind of accept that what's been working for you all of a sudden doesn't really work. The tip is to be really honest with yourself when you're feeling things changing. You don't want to continue in a dynamic that's no longer kind of sits right for you while your partner thinks that it is, you know, because then you're not really being honest, and then things in a dynamic are going to start changing, and they might interpret it as something else because you haven't told them what's actually going on inside you. So relationships always change. There's always an ebb and flow. Even in monogamy, there are phases where you're really, really in love, phases when you can't stand each other, you know. But there's an underlying kind of connection, love, or another reason why you're together. And as long as that's there, it's okay to accept that one or both of you will change with time, and give space for that to happen. And when my partner, you know, is at one stage very, very free and carefree and has lots of time, and we can do lots of things together and travel and have adventures, and then another time she may be working really, really hard and super, super stressed and has no energy, the relationship is going to change as well. And it's because of an external reason, but that's life, right? And we find ways to work around that and to focus on the things we can still do together. And if that means, for example, that you met somebody else that you want to, for example, you know, make your primary, because you both decide that you want to live together, you both are looking to, I don't know, make a home or have a family, and you need to tell that to a partner that isn't interested in kids and family, right? But you still want to kind of maintain a connection with them. So it going back to the previous question, it may mean less time with them all of a sudden. And there is, you know, again, it's an important conversation to have. You want to do it with the right kind of tools for it. You want to sit down. You want to be in a good place when you're doing it. You want to affirm the things you still do have together, you know, and really validate that. So the person isn't feeling rejected. That's, I think, really important.
I would mention, though, that from my experience, rules can sometimes be good and just about practical things, not necessarily how the other person spends their time or does with their body, whatever they do with their body. But it can be something like you buy a couple of sex toys together and you may not want them to use these sex toys with someone else. So you can create a rule about this. Maybe they're not that happy about it, but you can say, well, then I'm going to take these and you buy the same ones with someone else.
But I think it's terminology. Yeah. It's more of a terminology thing, I would say. Just like I wouldn't call that a rule. I would call it, this is your boundary and you're telling me this. And, you know, I respect it because in this situation, it doesn't really affect me, except maybe I need to spend some more money on another set of toys. But that is your boundary because it's directly touching on you and how it affects you. I think that rules are like, you're not allowed to, I don't know, for example, one of the common rules happen in couple relationships, in heterosexual couples, where the man says you can have relationships only with women, but not with other men, you know? And that is a rule that's going to hand it down. And to my mind, without much logic. But whereas, you know, if I think about it in terms of agreements, then, you know, I have an agreement that if I am not using condoms with a partner, that anybody else who's more of a casual and not them, I will use condoms and I will practice safe sex and I will get tested and tell her the results and, you know, share my test results with other people, you know. And so there's like agreements that we create that we want to abide by in order to create a safer environment for everybody.
Yeah. I'm aware that we've got 20 minutes to the full time that we've given ourselves for questions. So we may not be able to answer all of the questions that we've got, still 10 to go. And I want us to spend at least like to 5-6 minutes on key aspects of how to manage relationships, open relationships better. So how about we discuss this and then we'll go back to questions if we've got left.
Yeah, I mean, there's a question that's kind of, some of the questions touch on it as well. So maybe we can, if we already covered it, then that may be an answer to that question. In terms of managing it, again, it really depends on what the relationship is, right? So there's no one answer, because if you're open or poly, the way you're managing it will be quite different. So I don't know, like, do you have a more specific kind of question in mind, or do you want me to kind of talk about each dynamic separately?
So I would say how to manage key aspects of open relationships would be around, we have covered a lot, but I think there's interesting aspects around, for instance, how we make these agreements. When do we open the question of introducing new people and things like that? Because even like one of the next questions says how to be open in a new relationship from the beginning. People tell me that it's better to first have a close relationship to build trust and strong bond. What is your opinion on that? Well, that is all good if you're single and you're starting a poly relationship. But when you're in a poly relationship and you're introducing new people, that becomes more difficult. Yeah. For instance.
Yeah. So again, I guess the answer will vary. If I touch on what the questioner is asking, it very much depends on you and how much, say, new relationship energy and that kind of like super intense feelings you get in the beginning of a relationship is like overpowering to you, because some people really want to spend that time getting to know somebody intimately. They can spend all the time in the world with them and won't get tired of it, right? I think that with experience of poly, you also realize that new relationship energy, NRE, doesn't last, and it's also something that can kind of impact on making rational choices. So it's good to know that it exists. For example, you start seeing somebody while you have a relationship, and all of a sudden you're like madly in love and may start dedicating more time to that new partner rather than to your existing partner, who supports you and is there with you for a long time. So I think knowing that it exists and understanding that you can balance that out, ultimately you're just because you want to spend all the time in the world with a person doesn't mean you need to. If you only see them once or twice a week, this NRE will actually last a longer time. So there's no law that says that you have to right away like jump on the relationship escalator, move in together, like do this. Nobody says that's the case. There's a lot of, again, going back to kind of misconceptions, I think generally about relationships is one that it has to escalate in a particular way, that it has to basically always go up. Some relationships are happy where they are and just like leave them down, and that's okay, and you're enjoying what you're doing together, and that's fine. Also, another one is that relationship has to be successful, you have to basically be in it for a very long time, until death or something. Again, wrong, Some relationships last a year, 6 months, 5 years, whatever. If you had a great time together, if you both got something really important out of it, and you came to the point where no longer your needs are not being met in that relationship, and you discuss it and agree as adults, to talk and recognize that it's no longer working, you can part as friends. You can shift your relationship from one thing to another. What I love about poly is that it's available to do that. You can morph a relationship from maybe being romantically and sexually connected to maybe moving to something that's like less about sex and more about friendship, or maybe it's just about sex and no longer about deep intimacy and sharing things, and that's all fine.
Absolutely, I agree. And I'm looking at the next one. We have so many people. So someone says, so you're starting a new relationship, there's a feeling like you want to be open with rules and agreements, at the same time the need to take time to let it develop. Any tips on expressing needs, rules at the beginning of a new connection? At the same time, any red flags to note with a new partner?
Well, yeah, loaded question, a lot of stuff. So in terms of, it's similar to the previous one in the sense that when you're starting a relationship, it's very important that you talk about your values, right? You can be very different people, and you may, have, say, different love languages. But one of the things to really figure out early on is what are your love languages, and understand that what makes you happy may not make the other person necessarily happy as much, right? So just because, say, you love touch, giving touch without making sure that the other person that's what they want as well, is not going to work. So listening to what their love languages and what their needs are, and communicating your own. Talking about these kind of like top values. So for example, for my overarching value, I've realized over the years, is freedom. If I'm told you can't do this and this and this, I'm just going to get mad and get angry and get restless. But that doesn't mean that when I have freedom, I just, go wild. I don't. But I know that my need for freedom is respected. And in fact, it's something that my partners love about me. So, and obviously they don't want me to be sad, so they want me to express that when I need to, right? So, and people's values are different. For some, it could be like family, or safety or security. It's all different. And I feel that no matter how different people are, if their values are kind of clashing, it's going to be a problem. So coming up with this idea that, if you know you want to be open, but you're not sure that your new partner is also in that mindset, first you can ask them. It's much easier to ask these hard questions right in the beginning where there's not so much at stake than when you're already deep in love and kind of committed to things and like have accepted that things are a certain way. So putting this up all up front is actually really would be better. And you don't have to be as afraid because you don't have so much to lose yet. So yeah, just like if this is who you feel you are poly or you're non-monogamous, just come out and say it. Don't kind of even, I personally would say it if I'm doing dating online, it's in my profile. If I'm talking to somebody before we meet, I will let them know in advance. Obviously, I will tell them what my relationship dynamic is now, but even if I was single, I will say that this is the relationship dynamic that I believe in. So they have a chance to not meet me if that's not right for them. And there were cases where I told this to somebody and they were like, well, I'm actually monogamous, but it's really interesting what you're doing and I appreciate your honesty. I'm happy to meet just as friends. And then it's like, we know we've established that we're meeting as friends. And in some cases, there was a second date because they kind of changed a little bit their mind and wanted to see where it goes. But I've made it clear that what my intentions are. When it comes to red flags, anything around kind of possessiveness, things that trigger a very kind of dramatic, kind of violent or verbally violent reaction is a red flag. I know some people are very passionate and talk with their hands and maybe yell and stuff, but like it's really important that when you're having disagreements, you know how to have the disagreements. You know how to talk even when you don't agree on something, and just sit down and like express yourself without making it the other person's problem to deal with. And when that happens, when the conversation goes to you make me feel like this and this, and like you've ruined my day, or like you've done this to me, then that's not helpful, and that's kind of a red flag. So
take ownership, basically. They need to be taking ownership of their feelings, of their desires. If you're playing the blame game, even for the smallest of things, your relationships will go in the gutter. Yeah. Wow, we still have so many.
This is a question we already had, I think. It was in the chat before.
What is the best way to empathize with a partner who feels jealousy when I don't experience it myself?
Good question. You don't judge people according to how you feel about it, because they have their own, obviously, ways of feeling about things. And are you still there?
Yeah, I'm just coughing my brains out.
Okay, so the best thing is to listen, and to come from a place of, you love this person, you want them to be comfortable, and even if you don't understand the feeling, they need to know that it's a valid emotion, that it's a valid feeling, and to validate it. This is something that's kind of, I guess, personal to me, because we get that. I get it in my relationship, and I guess I'm doing my best to tap into my kind of desire for her to be happy and to feel heard. And that means sitting down, listening to it, and kind of trying to understand, right? Or like asking for questions that maybe some kind of examples of things that would make me understand it better. Do you have anything more to add on that?
I think just really listening and having an open, non-confrontational conversation. Like, when you do X, then I feel like I'm not good enough, because it really plays on this insecurity of mine. And I think that there is an onus on the person feeling the jealousy to really express and get to the root of why, to then be able to explain to the person who doesn't feel that same way, because if they don't have that experience and have that emotion, then they can't just imagine how it feels like. So again, I think a lot of it comes back to understanding yourself and then being able to communicate that, and then being able to hear it. Yeah.
And take time for that. Like, set aside time to sit down and talk about it. Show that it's an important thing. Don't just toss it off because you don't understand it. Like I said, these kind of relationships take a lot of talking, a lot of communication.
They do indeed. Someone else says, what are good spaces to meet poly people is a poly-curious person, London, UK based.
So there's like normal time and there's coronavirus time. In normal time, there are a lot of meetups and events for poly people. I mean, every month there's something, almost every week there's something. There are poly coffee every month on a Saturday. There's a poly cocktails where you can meet people. There are women's only meetings and men's only group for poly people who identify as men that I run monthly. And it's something that you can find on Facebook. If you're also a little bit kinky, there's also information on events on FetLife that some of them are specifically focused on kinky poly people. And now that we are in lockdown and there are no physical events, there are online kind of Zoom parties and meetings that some organizations run that are not specifically for poly people, but are very poly friendly. And I know that organizations like the Summer House organize these and others. And then there are some apps that are kind of set up themselves to be kind of focused on that market of people who are non-monogamous. One of them that put a lot of effort into that and also had their own events before lockdown is Feeld, F-E-E-L-D. But ultimately, I think that, again, when I was online dating, I used OkCupid a lot, and you can filter people by their preference for being non-monogamous. And my profile clearly said that I was poly, and I would essentially just talk to people who also identified as non-monogamous.
Yeah, but it does show you people that are monogamous as well. Like, I've tried OkCupid, still show me people that are marked as mono, so.
I guess you need to also filter out the ones that just say it because they're looking for sex, and kind of. So that's the risk there. Yeah.
Especially as a woman, and that's the thing. That's why I wouldn't necessarily say from the get-go, because the reactions are really like, the fuck, honestly. Just no. How common is co-parenting in polydynamics?
It's quite common. I have friends who are poly and they have, with children, and that's their own children, but they each have other partners, and the partners also help look after the kids, and and the kids know them as daddy or mommy's kind of special friends or whatever, or boyfriend or girlfriend. And when kids grow up with that, it's not really a big deal at all to just accept it, There are more intricate kind of complex polycules where people really kind of raise children together. I think that, I don't know how common it is in London specifically, but all different dynamics exist. And in some way, I think that if you have more adults to help out, it's a good thing, with regards to looking after kids.
It takes a village to raise a kid, right? So why not? I also know people who are in open relationships and poly families, and they raise their children perfectly fine. I keep saying that pathology comes from outside. It's not something that we realize is strange or whatever, especially when we grow up with something. Everything is normal, whatever you grow up with. So a lot of people have asked me, what about, having kids and being poly? Honestly, unless you self-stigmatize and put yourself under so much pressure about it, your kids wouldn't know a difference. It wouldn't make any difference to them whether you have 2 partners or 3 or whatever. It's only when other people tell you and tell them that this is abnormal, this is wrong, and all of that, then you need to manage it a bit more. But otherwise, kids grow up with it, and as Roy said, they find it as perfectly normal. And we have 2 more, and I'm like, we're gonna shut these questions down. Any advice for LGBT people? I'm gay man and find there is an absence of men interested in men in poly circles. I have resigned myself to the fact that I'm going to have to convert someone. You need to unmute yourself.
So being straight myself, I don't have first-hand advice, but in the men's group that I run, there are also gay men, but it's not designed to meet people. It's more about support, going through emotional things and asking for advice. A lot of people who are also poly are kind of pansexual or bisexual, and it's like more fluid than only gay or only straight. But I think that, like, from listening to Dan Savage, who is gay, there's a lot of non-monogamy in gay culture, and a lot of gay couples do play with other people even though they're emotionally monogamous. But in terms of like where to meet people, I don't know if the advice was about meeting people or just about it is about meeting people, right? I would encourage you to go to poly events specifically and get to know more about poly as a dynamic and as as a lifestyle, and ultimately maybe you wouldn't introduce it to somebody who would then be curious about it and want to know. I mean, you don't want to like convert anybody when they're not happy about it, but it could be that they just don't know enough about it, and would welcome the information.
Yeah, I would second that. I would say if you join the poly community, there will be LGBT people in it, because these are just sometimes overlapping communities that are great at coexisting, and you may just end up finding someone who is poly and who is gay there. So just dive into the poly community. I'm guessing you're part of the LGBTQ community wherever you are, but explore what your options are in the poly community and also in the kinky community, because these 3 do interact a lot. Definitely. And last one, if you were to create a survival kit for people interested in becoming poly, what kind of things would you recommend? Books, etc.
The Ethical Slut definitely should be in there. I like the book Sex at Dawn, which is more of a sociological kind of study, but it made a lot of sense to me as a way of rationalizing, like understanding that it's normal to be non-monogamous. And yeah, probably podcasts like Poly Weekly would be a good place to start. And yeah, just joining some, maybe joining groups where you can ask these questions just in terms of resources, because people often recommend different books. And some of these groups, why I agree that not all the advice given there is healthy or positive, they often have lists of resources for books and movies and things like that. So it's worth checking that out.
Awesome. Well, I think that one way or another, we definitely covered the key aspects of open relationships, how to manage them better, how to acknowledge our needs, how to acknowledge the other person, how to discuss the difficulty of managing and starting anything that's outside of the mainstream. So Rory has put his email in the chat. It's info@roygraff.com. So if you want more information from him and to get in touch, do use that. Roy, where do people find you outside of your email?
Well, outside of my email, they would have to come to London to find me. I basically I run kind of different workshops. I used to when we could do that, and I work with people individually. But I am not like advertising it through a website right now. There probably will be a website coming, but at the moment it's by email and then Skype or Zoom for one-to-one kind of coaching. So the best thing is to email me and ask any other questions. I can point them towards some of the groups, but it's if you're interested, say in the men's group or in Sex Geekdom, which is general resource group about sexuality, then you can I can put the names in there. You can find them on Facebook as well. Let me share the links in the chat as well.
I also want to say, if people are interested in this, this kind of topic, I have another webinar that I've done a long time ago that's on my Patreon page. So it's about the frequently asked questions, the misconceptions about fidelity and all of it. So if people are interested, please just Google patreon.com/lifesexperts and you would see it. It was recently published along with a lot more content that is sex positive, that's know-how based, etc. And for those who have missed this, it will be on Patreon next week if you want to rewatch it, etc. So please do check out the groups that Roy is putting down on the chat. One of them is Sex Geekdom London, and the other one is London Men's
and relationships.
Yes, someone is asking if I can add the Patreon link. So it's www.patreon.com/lifesexperts. Boom. Thanks to everybody who joined us. And if you want to work on these issues and these questions with Roy or myself, please feel free to reach out and explore what we can do for you. And Roy is sharing polyweekly.com, multiamory.com, savagelovecast.com. So check out these resources, and as I said, if you want some one-to-one support with your relationships, please reach out. The Facebook groups are great, except they're not. So use experts, Sexperts, etc. And if you don't fancy us for whatever reason, there is a great website called findmysexperts.com. I'm not being paid for it, okay? But you can find people I'm not being paid for saying this, okay? But there are great people that are on this website that can help with different aspects of your sexuality. So there's a shout out for this. So Roy, thank you for joining tonight.
Wow, it's been,
How did you find this?
Intense, good. I feel like I need to go and drink something now.
I feel you. I feel drained every single time after a webinar.
Yeah.
But
Anyway,
then
thank you also. Thanks for the questions, and thanks to all the participants for really kind of deep questions. I like the questions. So
absolutely
challenge me as well.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, thanks everybody to participating tonight, and I hope to see you join us in future events that I organize, such webinars, and check out me online and just by googling like Sexperts.
Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Good night, everybody. Bye.